The sorry, we had a little problem with the YouTube stream. We're waiting on our guests to come in. Uh, I'm just waiting for the thumbs up from our producer Juan to let us know that everything is going to be good with them. Okay, we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in our guests. Who we have is Don and Bob. They're with Veteran Hope, and Veteran Hope is a uh, military and veteran divorce organization. So we'll go ahead and bring them in. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Doing okay, Mike.
Still having technical difficulties. I can see you, but I can't get much out of this because I'm dealing with the phone right now. The computer did not want to cooperate.
Well, Bob, I can hear you and see you just fine. Same with you, Don. Don, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, nice Skipper.
I believe last time I had you on, we also were talking with the great Ron Coleman.
Yeah, I believe so. We were talking. We did touch on this subject briefly, the disability, VA disability compensation and divorce and child support and alimony and that whole
It
fraud there.
it's a very very tangled thing, but it's something that affects so many people. And a lot of them after they've transitioned. This is one of the major contributors when you start looking at into the numbers of veteran suicides, which we experience 22 every single day. This is always a stressor.
Yeah, I've actually I think that 22 is something the VA puts out there, and I think I've heard that it's actually between 45 and 70, the actual number. Um,
I could believe that. I very much could believe that
and
that is the
that's
case.
you know one is too many.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's something that's affected me and it's affected you. And, we both served at a time where, you know, we were both married guys, both doing our thing out in Afghanistan, but it puts a significant amount of stress. And what's been happening with many is you're told, look, your benefits are fair game.
Right. And that's what the courts say. The courts say, anything and everything is income, but that doesn't. And this is Bob has done probably more research than anybody on this, but it's not income. And the federal law says it's not. But
Mhm.
Bob, you're sideways now. But anytime you want to jump in, Bob, because this is you're really the guru here.
I think he might be on the line with Juan, trying to get everything
Okay.
squared away on that end. Juan,
Okay.
Juan's the man behind the curtain. He makes everything happen.
Okay. Is the
Now,
wizard?
you and I are both in California, and we've had to deal with the California family court system. Um, Give us your impression.
My impression of the family court system in California?
Yes.
It's uh, well, let's see. What kind of words can I use that are clean enough for this show? It's a joke. Um, it's there's a reason. It's not just California, but there's a reason. There's a documentary out there called Divorce Corp. I
Hmm.
don't know if you've heard it or you've seen it or heard of it.
I have not. I'll
Um,
have to check it out.
but the whole thing is, it's yeah, you should. It's not exclusive to the military, but being in Southern California, makes it worse for military members. And it seems like there are too many judges out here that legislate from the bench, which is what happened in my case
Hmm.
regarding my VA disability compensation and my retirement. Um, my judge violated state and federal law and didn't really seem to care. Just seemed like he likes to play pin the tail on the donkey with the law. Just if he gets it right, great. If not, who cares? Call it a day.
I guess the biggest problem I have with the VA disability is it changes. And the VA is very upfront about that. That, hey, yeah, you have this right now, but until you're total and permanent, they're going to come back and relook at all of your conditions and they're going to, reevaluate those. And it can go down just as fast as it goes up. And I mean, there's overpayments,
Right.
underpayments. Anyone who's been in the military has experienced like, oh, I got a paycheck of way too much money. I've got to put this all in the savings account because what's going to happen is they're going to come in and take this money from me.
Right, exactly. And the courts look at it, the courts decide for themselves that they're going to call it income, even though it's not, doesn't fit the legal definition of income.
which
And
is
it's intended to compensate those of us for our injuries, those of us who've been injured in service.
which is very interesting because, like, as it applies to military retirement benefits, the DoD has a very well laid out system. I worked you know doing ID cards, and that's exactly what that system is for. It's Deers, and that was my introduction to the military. Was doing that my first 6 months or so in the fleet, and when you've been married X amount of time and it's overlapped with that X amount of service, your retirement, they're like, these are the benefits you'll get, and you'll get them for this amount of time, and it's very clear cut. But with disability, it's not that way.
Right. Yeah. And if you look at it like a car accident, if somebody, a car accident, slip fall accident, medical malpractice, whatever, nobody, no former spouse can get a portion of that. Doesn't matter whether you're married or not. That is intended for the intended victim.
Mm-hmm.
You can't divide that, but with military compensation, they can.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure the attorneys would argue, well, that that's not a lump sum. Well, it's not a lump sum for some of the reasons you mentioned. It can go up or it can go down. They can say, oh yeah, we determined. You can even be permanent and total, and then have them revoke it.
Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding. They could say, well, we said you were permanent and total, but you look like you're healed now, and they can take that away. So if they establish a support based on disability compensation, then and then they take it away, then you have to go back into court and you have to explain that you're not receiving that anymore.
And what's so asinine about this is, you know, for many veterans, they can, and this is how much it moves around. You can spend years fighting the VA trying to get your benefits. And I'll give you an example that I heard about earlier this year of a POW veteran who is in Ohio who had been fighting for his benefits since the very early 80s and was continually denied by the VA, and finally this year not only finally got his benefits, but they had to give him back pay, and it was like $2 million. That's how long the VA had been stalling him. Now, here's the question: if that's compensation, if that POW had kids, would they be entitled to that money? It would be the question. If this is income, technically someone could say, well, yeah, the spouse would have been entitled to that, but at no point was any of that money ever guaranteed. It's not income. Like you said, it's very much like a settlement.
Right.
And the other funny thing is, the one group who is very clear that they have no entitlement to this money is the IRS. Now, how crazy is it that the IRS doesn't think that they have any, they have no claim to the money, but the court system do.
Right, and they don't. That's because the courts tend to think that they have the right to preempt federal law.
Mm-hmm.
And the argument from the courts is that because the federal government gives the states the right to make decisions regarding family law issues, that the federal preemption doctrine doesn't apply. But that's not the case, because it's the federal government that's giving the compensation.
Now, I know we're still trying to get Bob in here, but can you explain a little bit about Veteran Hope and what they're trying to do?
Yeah, and it was just clear this up a little bit. Bob started the Veteran Hope. Bob's been working on this for about 3 decades, and we meet every week. He and I and other disabled vets meet every week by Zoom. But Bob's the one that's done all the research. I'm just the tenacious pain in the butt that asks him all kinds of questions. There you are, Bob. We got you.
Oh, he's not. He's not on the. He's not on the stream yet, but it looks like we do have several of the technical issues. Bob, welcome to the show.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Bob?
I can. I'm just working on a little bit of improvement on my audio settings.
Sure.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Terrific.
We can hear you and see you now. I was just talking with Don here
That's amazing.
a little bit about Veteran Hope. Can you explain a little bit about the organization, how it got started, and what you guys are attempting to do?
I went through some difficulty after being seriously disabled from military service and went through a divorce like a great many of our sisters and brothers do. And I had no idea that the law was against me. And by that, I mean the court systems. And I learned a lot over the years about what they were doing, which is looking at veteran benefits as if it was the same thing as income from work. But more than anything else, they actually seem to create a tension between us, my ex wife and I, that forced the issue to the money. And it was all about how to get the money. And it didn't matter that I was struggling with health problems and the difficulty getting through a VA claim, which ended up getting messed up rather badly for a long time. What mattered was they were going after me. And they used my children as an excuse to leverage my VA benefits. And I thought it was just me. I figured I was just too dumb to know any better, and I didn't I didn't have the language to explain that this is wrong and hurtful and counterproductive. So I just held on, did the best I could, and basically I stopped even going to the court because it was too stressful on me, and it was too difficult because feedback I got was that my children would suffer every time I caught my ex-wife's lawyer in a lie or misconduct. Uh, the backlash or the feedback I got was that my children suffered, and ultimately that's the problem. The system itself is using children as leverage, hostages to extract money from veteran benefits, and coming forward from that time in the year 2000, I started, well, being garnished by the state to pay the state on the leftover child support debt, even though my kids were still underage. But since my ex was receiving a direct payment of disability dependent benefits, the children were actually receiving payments. But the state came after me and garnished my disability benefits even more. That left me with about $600 a month to live on, which was pretty difficult. And I ended up homeless again. And I didn't know how to explain it, but I knew it was wrong. And I fought with them for a couple of years, and I demanded that they stop garnishing me and give me back the $10,000 that they took. And by the way, the child support order against me at that point in time was $68,000 based on a giant fairy tale that I wasn't disabled. But this is what they do to veterans. They look at veteran disability as free money, not as legal recognition of medical problems from military service. They just say, hey, it's free money. We can control that. So, employee 1490 of the state issued an order. He wants that refund back, or he wants that money back. Hell no. Issue an ex parte order denying a refund. And so they just sent me a letter and said, no, you can't have that money back. That's ours. And out of that $10,000 and change, not a single penny went to my ex. Not a single penny went to any aspect of anything connecting to my children. 75 cents on the dollar went to the payroll of state employees under Section 658 of Title 42, which is called Incentive Payments to States. And that's the smoking gun. But I didn't know that at the time. All I knew was they were taking my money. So I basically went back to living in my car and went through a couple of steps. Very difficult. Um, and I almost joined that statistical probability of suicide because I was on the edge, in and out of the hospital, really struggling. And everybody I talked to said, "Wow, that's terrible. What do you do?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know yet." But I started hanging around with a couple of veterans who were interested in uh, helping, and in I asked for help doing my VA claim, which
Hmm.
eventually did work. But I started volunteering, assisting veterans with just getting resources and filing claims and doing things. And one of the guys I work with um, had done the best he could, but had never filed a VA claim. And he was just struggling because his health was deteriorating so bad. And so I said, "Look, let's just file your VA claim and see what happens." And it took 2 years on the appeal to get his 100% rating.
Hmm.
Right about the same time he got his VA claim, he got a Social Security decision. So he had both payments coming in and immediately went through a brutal divorce that made mine look easy. And in the process of that divorce, the attorney working for his ex ran up $16,000 in attorney's fees, milking the thing back and forth, trying to waste time, throw paper, and confuse everybody by saying the veteran won the lottery. He got 50 grand in his pocket. He got 50 grand coming in every year. He's rich. He's rocking and rolling. The ex-wife, the poor dear, had nothing. She got nothing out of this. Now, granted, it was a 36-year marriage, but it was not a military retirement.
Hmm.
There was nothing there that could be connected to her as a right. So under both VA and Social Security. Former spouses are not intended beneficiaries. There's no room in the law to give them a right to the benefits.
Hmm.
There just isn't. So, whenever the state courts do that, they're creating a non existent, an inappropriate, illegal order. Every time a state court uses veteran benefits or basically produces any law or order to extract money from veteran benefits for either alimony or child support, they're doing so in violation of the federal law that says you cannot touch veteran benefits.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of people have referred to Section 5301 of Title 38 and said, "Man, that's the thing." And that is the supreme law of the land. It means what it says, and it says what it means. That veteran benefits cannot be touched by um, any legal or equitable process, whatever, which is meant to include alimony or child support orders,
Hmm.
either before or after receipt by the veteran. And all of the problem goes back to a 1987 case in the Supreme Court called Rose versus Rose. Every veteran that's ever been through a divorce, alimony, or child support is going to hear about Rose versus Rose, because this is the thing that they say is the keystone that proves that the law does not preempt state jurisdiction, except for one thing. The Rose Court decision was issued by the Supreme Court in 1987 based on the law that existed on the books at that time. And it boils down to Section 211, which was the section that describes jurisdiction. So it gave the administrator of the VA power to make the VA claim and or to make the VA decision, and basically said nobody should be touching this. But the exact words of that said decisions cannot be reviewed by any other official or any court of the United States,
Hmm.
which the Supreme Court said really just means the federal courts, not the state courts. And so they pointed out that Section 211 did not happen to preempt state jurisdiction. So in 1988, Congress, in a wall to wall bipartisan avalanche in both the Senate and the House, passed the Veterans Judicial Review Act and said, with the combined voice of the entire Congress, no, hell no, boys and girls. Nobody has jurisdiction to interfere with veteran benefits. If the benefits are being provided by the VA, the Secretary has exclusive jurisdiction on all law and fact that affects veteran benefits. In addition to that, Congress said since there was no history of a line of appeal where a veteran could take a decision where the VA had denied the benefit and appeal that decision to a court, uh, Congress said we want to provide a court. It was the Court of Appeals. It was the Court of Veterans Appeals, which is now called the Court of Appeals for Veteran Claims. But in 1988, Congress passed this law to make it clear veterans should be given the chance to apply for these benefits and should be given the benefit of a doubt. Once they have them, nobody has jurisdiction to touch them or to interfere with them or to interpret the law. Because interpretation of the law is when a judge looks at it and says, well, gee, I think it means this. Well, since 211 became very easy to understand, very absolute, and it's called positive law, which means it is the evidence of the law. It is the law itself, passed by Congress word for word. It says nobody can touch veteran benefits. And then not long after that, 1991, August 6th of 1991, the Veterans Administration fully shifted over to being the Department of Veterans Affairs. And that's a cabinet level executive office. So when that changed, Section 211 became Section 511. Section 3101 became Section 5301. Now, I've given you this long history lesson to illustrate one important thing. When Congress says, hell no, boys and girls, nobody can touch this, hands off. Congress means that. This was the purpose of the Veterans Judicial Review Act, to help veterans and their families by protecting them from the illegal, I want to call it extraction of money from veteran benefits. And at that point, we should have been a lot safer, but we weren't. Because guess what? Fancy attorneys with tricky language came in and threw semantics and fraud and garbage and said Rose versus Rose. And they just kept repeating this. And at this point in time, it doesn't matter what you say to any state court judge. Mm-hmm. You walk in and you tell them the law says this. It doesn't matter what you say. They are absolutely mortally terrified of being the first one to admit 30 years of predatory corruption. They're not going to admit it because half of their budget comes from the extraction of money from people under child support enforcement. And out of that commission that they get from doing child support enforcement, they're going after veterans. They're going after Social Security beneficiaries. They're going after active duty military because they use housing allowance as if it were part of income. California judge not too long ago said if it looks like income, it counts as income, and we just plug it in. That's part of the alimony and child support, except for one thing. Federal law defines what is pay for active and retirees. And that pay includes regular pay, base pay, special pay, retired pay, but does not include allowances. So allowances cannot be treated as income for any reason by any court under any authority. The state has no authority to override the federal definition of pay. Certainly, active military and retired pay can be treated as income for alimony or child support, but allowances cannot. VA benefits cannot. And if you actually look at combat-related special compensation, it is also totally exempt because the law says it is not part of retired pay. But again, we look back at judges are doing this all over the country. And veterans are being put in jail almost all the time because they say that on Rose versus Rose, or under the belief that Rose has precedent, judges can put veterans in jail to extract money from veteran benefits because Rose versus Rose said so. Essentially, what they're saying is that the Rose decision canceled the power of Congress to preempt state jurisdiction. And that's ludicrous.
So let
So,
me ask you this: for your organization, what options are available here then?
well, we have to reach all three branches of government because sooner or later, one of them is going to help us. We have to speak to Congress and say, here's the relationship between this particular law about child support. 42 U.S. Code, Section 659, says that veteran benefits cannot be touched unless they're being taken instead of military retirement. That should simply say veteran benefits cannot be touched.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to ask Congress to look at Section 658A, which is the incentive funding, and say, gee whiz, state employees have converted this otherwise reasonably good idea about enforcing child support because it should be done. But they've converted it into a systematic money generating program to put, to improve their paychecks. They've created this embezzlement scheme based on this federal law that indicates that if they make more child support orders, bigger child support orders, and they collect, and the easiest way to collect is to garnish VA or Social Security benefits, to jump all over the veteran and hold them in contempt, throw them in jail, and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing is more devastating than our heartbreaking loss of connection with our children and our spouse, and it hurts us more than anything else. All right, and the difference between the family court and the battlefield is on the battlefield, you can shoot back. It's okay. In a family court, you got to mind your manners and you got to listen to what they say. And even when it's completely wrong and illegal, we have to understand that arguing with the judge in his courtroom is not going to help your case or situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why veterans are really struggling with pain. And usually it's about a 3 to 5 year window after they go through this episode. They try to get help and they talk to attorneys and they try to reach out and ask for help in the community. And they find out that there is none, not one single attorney. Well, one. Uh, Basically, attorneys will not help veterans. There's no money to be made.
Mm-hmm.
And they will not help us because it's so much easier to simply vacuum every penny out of the family. And they say, "Oh, we'll put up a good fight. We'll put up a good fight. Keep bringing me money." The bad attorneys just eat the families alive, active duty and retirees and veterans. They just whatever you've got belongs to them, and they don't care what happens to the children. They don't care what happens to the former spouse. They sure as hell don't care what happens to the veteran.
Mm-hmm.
So the veteran goes through the heartache, hardship, and problem of this episode. They can't see their family, and they don't know what to do. And this is the connection between hopelessness, homelessness, suicide. And this is why veterans are dying every day by poverty and suicide because they are illegally stripped of their benefits by these corrupt attorneys, officials, and courts. So, looking at the law says you can't touch veteran benefits. We're also going from talking to Congress about this and asking them to look at making that change in the words of the law to speaking to the courts and saying, hey, if you look at the supreme law of the land, and you remember, court rulings are not the supreme law of the land. The actual law written by Congress pursuant to the Constitution, that is the supreme law of the land. And that takes precedent over court rulings that say anything else, like, guess what? Rose versus Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And we're asking the court to say, according to the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution, states' law cannot break federal law, does not override federal law.
Mm-hmm.
The supreme law of the land is the top. If there's a conflict between a state law and a federal law, the federal law wins. The other point is to say that under the 14th Amendment, no state shall make or enforce any law that abridges the rights of the citizens. And every single time a state comes along and writes a law to extract money from veteran benefits, they do so in violation of that. And while we're talking about this, one of the things about the supremacy clause that a lot of people don't really notice is that all judges in every state are automatically bound by federal law pursuant to the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, and then required to bind themselves further by oath or affirmation. And likewise, every state legislator, every member of Congress, every executive elected official is also required to bind themselves by oath or affirmation to support the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Every judge, every official, every elected official, and every legislator, state and federal level. So there's no room for error. There's no room for disagreement. There's no room for interpretation.
So let me.
So obviously, we want to reach Congress about fixing that little bump in the law that has been turned into a money-making scam run by a small number of state officials. We also want to talk to the courts and get them to recognize that the supreme law of the land is, in fact, the supreme law of the land. We want to talk to the VA and get them to understand that VA policy on the garnishment of veteran benefits is not controlled by 42 U.S. Code Section 659. VA policy should begin with 38 U.S. Code 511, which is the jurisdiction statute that says the VA has total jurisdiction. And nobody can order the Secretary of the VA to extract money from the veteran. That's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And even after the veteran has that money in his pocket, it's illegal. We also need to reach out and ask the president to contact the Department of Justice and investigate this for what it really is: the predatory embezzlement of veteran benefits by state employees and private terrible attorneys. I'm trying to refrain from using my favorite words.
So,
But
for the veterans who are out there and they're watching this and they're on board with you, what should they do?
first off, learn what the law actually says. Read your Constitution. I mean, if it weren't for us raising our hands and saying, I am here to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that includes domestic criminals. The reason we have a Constitution is because we as a nation and our forefathers and a few of the friends of our forefathers got together and said, man, we see a lot of problems in the whole world because of the ordinary corruption of every state government, every country government, every group of people, every business, every national corporation, every kind of international business. There's always a vulnerability to corruption. We would like to do a better job in order to form a more perfect union. Not a perfect union, but a more perfect union, a little bit better. The forefathers produced the Constitution not to control us as citizens or us as residents of this country, but to give us the ability to provide our government with adult supervision, to give us the ability to provide our government with leadership and communication. Because if they're disconnected and we're disconnected, we're just a bunch of people running around crying about the problem. But we can't reach a solution if we don't understand that our government is there for us. We're not here for them. They're here for us. And our job, our adult supervision comes from voting and talking to Congress, writing letters to Congress, letting them know, hey, I see the smoking gun connection between veteran suicide and the predatory fraud extracting money from veteran benefits. I see this as a problem. Please look at the law and change the law so that it says veteran benefits are exempt. Social Security benefits are exempt. They're not supposed to be given away as alimony, and as sure as hell not supposed to be given to the state employees. In fact, if you look, 1989, Bennett versus Arkansas, the court said states are not intended beneficiaries of Social Security. So they cannot collect that money even to make up for welfare payments spent out by the state. Same thing was raised about veteran benefits in Nelson versus Heiss and half a dozen other cases since then. And yet we look at something as horrible as the 2017 case. We've mentioned Howell briefly, but
Mhm.
the Howell case um, reinforces the Mansell case from 1989. But in 2017, um, Joseph Holmes in Louisiana, no, let's see, Alabama, I think,
Alabama.
received
Holmes is Alabama.
$43,000 from the VA based on his appeal, showing that he was totally disabled since at least 2010.
Mhm.
Now, in 2017, he was about 70 years old or older because we know he was in the Navy in 1972. So here he is, this elderly fella, and he gets $43,000 in his account because the VA says, yep, totally disabled. And he was on supplemental security income before that, which we know
Mhm.
from reading his case file. So the state couldn't touch Social Security or supplemental security income. And they said, nah, we can't touch that. But boy, oh boy, we can touch this VA benefit. The minute that was deposited, a couple of employees from the state of Alabama sent out an order to extract that money from Mr. Holmes' account.
Wow.
And not one single penny went anywhere other than the state budget for payroll for child support. Now, they said, this is a child support order. No, it's not.
So, so veterans who want to align themselves with Veteran Hope, how can they reach out to you? How can they start connecting and start fighting back on this?
First point of connection is check the website, veteranhope.org, and uh, learn about the how to explain what is a right. A right is not just I got a right. A right is a certain law applies to me in terms of veteran benefits. 5301 and 511 of Title 38 apply to me as a veteran with disability. And those laws that apply to me give me the ability to say, under the Constitution of the United States, this being a supreme law of the land, pursuant to the Constitution, I have an individual right to protection from being having money extracted from my VA benefits. That is a right. You can't say my rights have been violated without saying this law gives me an individual right that's separate from other people. And when you look at um, learning about this, helps make it easier to explain what we're going through. But when you go on the website, you can learn about this. I see my website up there. Thank you. Um, and the purpose of this information, I've been publishing since 2010. Numerous other people have been publishing since the early 2000s. Jerry Berry and Gene Symes have been publishing Area 5301. Gene Symes is with the Operation Firing for Effect and has been publishing information. There are several other people who have brought a great deal of information to the table. The difficulty is making it easy to read and understand. And there's some material on this website that takes a little while to chew on because you have to understand. The spouses want some money and the children need some money. And that's a fact. We're not trying to get out of child support. We're trying to protect our family from the predatory extortion that is being issued upon us by corrupt attorneys and bad judges. We're trying to deal with the fact that with disability, our lives have changed. We can't do the stuff we used to.
Yeah.
And disability is not an excuse to get out of anything, parenting or work or otherwise. It's not a doctor's note that says you're not allowed to work. Disability is a legal determination that you have medical problems that are going to interfere with your
It's not
ability
an
to work.
easy
That
way
are
to
going
get that
interfere with your
determination
ability.
from the VA, I'll tell you.
True that. For every one that does get through on a lie or a fraud, there's 100 that don't even get their claims done. the VA is an evidence based system. You have to prove some stuff walking in the door, or you're not going to get very far. And even if you do prove it, getting the benefits might take a while. So, whatever you need, work with veterans organizations who can help you. But the fact is, once veterans have these benefits, they're exempt from everybody. And that's an important quality. We're supposed to be protected. And that means our spouses, our former spouses, and our children are protected. Because in order to protect our country, we have to do this difficult job we cannot outsource to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And under the contract with the federal government and based on the law itself, we are eligible for care, medical care, and compensation for loss of ability to produce income through work. So when we look at this, there is additional consideration for the dependents, but they don't have a separate right at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And the states don't have authority to give them an equal or greater right to the benefits than the veteran. Federal funds are allocated for veteran benefits to make it so the veteran can have the ability to provide housing and food and shelter and clothing and health care for their dependent family members. It's not given for the purpose of alimony or child support payments.
Especially if
And that's why
the state's taking it and the families aren't getting it.
Yeah, because most of what we see, we think of the idea of the expression child support, where we think that's providing funds for the care and feeding of our children. But that's not really what it's about. Back in, I want to say, 90, 97, 98, Blessing versus Freestone was a heavy duty case out of Arizona that explained Title 4D child support enforcement is not about the parents' rights. They don't have individual rights under child support.
Mm-hmm.
Child support enforcement is about the state's right to reimburse itself by extracting money from you. And that's what makes it hideously dangerous. That's what has inspired these state employees to commit the fraud of saying that veteran benefits are part of this. Social Security is part of child support. Because for them to extract money from the federal government, they have to extract it from us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just fighting for the veterans to the exclusion of our family. We're fighting for the veterans to protect our family from the bad attorneys who lie, cheat, and steal, who create these things. Every penny taken by an attorney for the former spouse or for the veteran to fight over VA benefits is money extracted from that family, money taken by the act of fraud. If you're fighting over veteran benefits, you should be disbarred. And when it comes to the high side of looking at judges, one caveat: see, judges have immunity for almost anything they do,
Mm-hmm.
except when they have no jurisdiction to do what they do. So they've got jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction to make child support orders, even if they're breaking the law doing it. Can't get them in trouble for that. You can say, hey, the law says you have to do this. Due process of law means you have to start over and do a better job. And we can talk to them about that under the 14th Amendment. That's what Section 1983 is about. But one of the things that you can find on my website is information about using Section 1983 of Title 42, which is from the Second Enforcement Act of 1871 following the Civil War. And it says that even a judge can be sued for due process of law. Say, hey, they messed up. The law says you're supposed to do this. That's an individual right, a specific law that applies to me, not the other people here. So that means you have to start over and do it correctly. But it's very hard to sue a judge for money unless they have no possibility of jurisdiction, which is the case with veteran benefits. And last year, the Supreme Court decision in Torres versus Texas Department of Public Safety
Mm-hmm.
shows that the state itself is liable for discrimination against a veteran with disability. And that's another big step.
I do remember that case.
The
Yeah.
court the court acknowledged that Title 38 is exempt from state jurisdiction. They don't have room to interpret Title 38 or to change the law by adding or taking away any ideas in it. So, anyways, I've presented a lot of information. There's a lot to chew on. The main thing that I want to say right now is this is not about me making anything up. Um, every statement of fact and law can be verified because on my website, under the absurd mythology of Rose, child support and the absurd mythology of Rose, you can actually go to the Library of Congress and the Supreme Court and dig out an actual copy of every one of these decisions and every change in the law. So you can see how that has progressed. And if you like, I can also provide history of 42 U.S. Code Section 659, which is the garnishment statute. And I can explain and demonstrate exactly how the change in Title 38 made veteran benefits exempt from Section 659. And even though Congress merged the old Section 662 into 659, saying that VA benefits received instead of retired pay could be garnished, can't, because the Veterans Judicial Review Act made veteran benefits exempt. So,
you are
again, a lot to chew on.
incredibly
Writing
researched.
letters.
I want
Thank
to
you.
point something out too. Bob is not doing this for money.
Oh yeah, and I really want to
more-
thank both of you gentlemen for coming on and giving your stories, because your children are both grown. Like, this is not really affecting you anymore. You're trying to right a wrong that you know is happening to so many veterans out there today.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did lose thousands of my VA disability compensation that I probably will never get back. But yeah, now I'm trying to right a wrong because I'm tired of judges legislating from the bench
Hmm.
and doing what they do. I'll point something else out real quick here because he mentioned Rose versus Rose, and many attorneys just repeat that as if it's the game of telephone without ever researching it. Or there's one particular attorney on the East Coast that knows better, but he continues to perpetuate that lie. Um, that Rose versus Rose is really not relevant. But in the case of Charlie Wayne Rose had 3 tours in Vietnam, was a triple amputee and blind in one eye. And he was incarcerated by the state of Tennessee until he agreed to pay support. I mean, that's the short story. But my question is to anybody going after support, how could you expect this person, when you're an able-bodied person, when he's gone through everything he's gone, how could you say, oh yeah, I want him to pay support? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Just want people, because most people don't know about Charlie Wayne Rose.
No, it's good to know the
I would
history.
like to address that because in many cases, people get very angry. And I get this in half of the phone calls that come in. They say, "Oh, my ex-wife wants more money. My ex-husband is taking the kids and won't let me see them." And all of this is about this big battle, and it's always they blame it on the ex, but a small part of me says, wait a minute, it's not really the ex that's feeding this demon. All right, it's the attorneys who are feeding the demon. The attorneys are milking the family. The attorneys are carrying this into court, even though they absolutely know that the supreme law of the land says that Rose has no more effect. They use Rose because it makes money. The court system uses Rose because it makes money.
The
The
trial
state
attorneys will
employees
dig
in
their
child
feet
support
in to fight you.
enforcement make most of their paycheck comes from the predatory embezzlement of federal funds through Title 4D, because that's how the family court system is funded. That's how the family court system became corrupted. This law that was intended by Congress to help them do a better job finding deadbeats became a system of going after disabled people and destroying families across the board systematically for state profit and for private attorney profit. And If you've got nothing, you can't fight back. And if you do have
Sure.
something and you say, oh boy, I can spend some money fighting this fight, everybody wants to say it's the X that's the problem. No, the court
Yeah.
is the
It's
problem.
the state
The
attorneys
families court,
general.
the House court officials, that's the problem. So let's take the pressure off of the family. Let's take the
Hmm.
pressure off of the X and say, let's look at the real problem. Who's really profiting off of this? Who's really get when the veteran dies from poverty or suicide, the money doesn't go to the family continuously. It ends. The VA doesn't pay survivor
Retroactive.
benefits
Yep.
on most suicide cases. The VA does not consider suicide a service connected death. They do not consider death by poverty in a cardboard box on a street corner service connected death. So they don't pay.
So for the
The
veterans
best they can
watching,
get is $200 for each show from
so
Social Security.
for the veterans watching, if you're on our YouTube channel, in the description of this video, I do have the website. It's veteranhope.org. That's where you can reach out. You can get in touch with people like Bob and Don, and you can reach out and talk with other veterans and start networking. I really am I'm glad to see that you gentlemen are taking on this fight. I'd like to see you guys doing some things such as some petitions and you know, when it comes election season, start getting these veterans to put their Congress people on the hot seat to address this issue, because I think you're right. It's an absolutely very important issue. I do want to thank both of you for coming on. We're coming up against our time. Is there anything else you guys, if someone wants to reach out, do you just want them to go through their website, or is there anywhere else you want them to reach out to you?
You can reach me by phone at 253 499 5805. You can also reach me by email, bob@veteranhope.org. And in looking at this, what we are doing is carrying several veterans in the process of going through federal court with intent to get to the Supreme Court so we can get their take on what the supreme law of the land says. We're
Excellent.
also contacting a variety of um, members of Congress to help them understand this particular issue, the smoking gun connection, and maybe they can change the law. And if we can reach Congress, if we can reach the president and the secretary, if we can reach the Supreme Court, these are the places we can make a big difference. Anyone who gets this positive effort from any one of these branches of our government will save lives, will help millions of families, and will protect our country from one of the most expensive and terrible uh, uh, problems in this country. And I thank you for having us here and letting us speak to the subject. I know I did a lot of the talking, but thank you for letting me bring that huge burden of information so that you can use it and help save lives.
No, thank you for joining us. If you have anything more that any updates or anything, definitely push them this way. We'll push them out on our social media. We'll do anything that we can to amplify, because I think you're doing some great work for our veterans out there. So for those of you watching, that was Don and Bob, both with Veteran Hope. You can go to veteranhope.org. You can research some more about their organization, reach out to them through there, and thank you for joining us, both of you gentlemen. And for those of you watching, thank you for watching the show tonight. We'll be back again next week with hopefully TC will be joining us. And as always, thank you for being worth serving.